Pauline Hanson began One Nation in Queensland. Actually, she came from Ipswich with the two Davids, David Oldfield and David Ettridge. And she was initially elected as an independent member for Oxley for the House of Representatives in 1996, the big election which John Howard came to power. She had appeared as a Liberal on the ballot paper because she'd been disendorsed by the Liberal Party just weeks before, given that she had written some unsavoury comments about Aboriginal people and entitlements to an Ipswich newspaper, as to a letter to the editor. And the Liberal Party very quickly moved to disendorse her. And of course, if nothing had been done or said, she probably would have passed into history unnoticed. But the national media picked this up, that she'd been disendorsed. There was a groundswell of support that somehow this woman had been a victim of the major parties, political correctness, etc. And she became something of a bit of a folklore hero for working class people around Ipswich and the seat of Oxley, and she did in fact win it. And within a few months, she'd started her own political party with the two Davids. They contested the 1998 state election, and everyone was quite shocked when One Nation won 11 of the 89 seats in the Queensland Parliament, with about a 23% of the vote. So almost 1 in 4 people in Queensland voted for this new party, this untested party, in 1998. The party very quickly fell apart in fighting. Half the members left to become independents, half joined the City-Country Alliance. So by the 2001 state election had come around, the party had all but disappeared. Pauline Hanson itself had become much more low profile, and the party pretty much fell into disuse. Pauline Hanson herself did contest 8 or 9 elections over the decade and a half, all unsuccessful, including in New South Wales. And including the Queensland Parliament again. And she did come close a couple of times, but it wasn't until 2016, the perfect storm, as it were, where there was a swing against the Turnbull government and the double dissolution, that allowed her to capitalise on the lower threshold to be elected, when she and her number 2, Malcolm Roberts, were elected, plus 2 other senators around Australia. So the time was right for a Hanson revival, and the party has gone from strength to strength between 2016 to 2019, but the wheels seem to have fallen off One Nation in the last couple of years, because the party did appallingly badly in the 2020 Queensland state election. Despite fielding a much larger candidate field, their vote almost halved. So the question now is, will the One Nation momentum be simply stalled at federal level? Will they influence the major parties in terms of their preferences? That's yet to be seen.
Now, George Christensen is now running for One Nation in the upcoming election. How does he fit into the party and its core values?
Yeah, well, I suppose we shouldn't really be surprised that Mr Christensen has joined One Nation. I mean, rhetorically and ideologically, he's been sort of heading in that direction for some time. He even threatened to leave the LNP, or cross the floor at least, some years ago. People remember when he was one of the first people to call for a Royal Commission to the banking industry, and the LNP was reluctant. And he was he was adamant that it had to happen. And pretty much from that point, I think he's been courted and wooed by minor parties. We know in recent times that Clive Palmer's United Australia Party has expressed interest in grabbing him. So it's no surprise that he's done this. I suppose the surprise is that it's come so late. Had he been courted by One Nation last year, and he jumped ship and joined One Nation, and he was still the member for Dawson and had made no announcement of resignation, he probably could have segued. He could have held that seat and segued to become a One Nation member for Dawson without too much difficulty. So I think the really surprising thing here is that it's all been done rather clumsily, and he's gone from holding a very safe LNP seat, which could have been a One Nation seat, to the unwinnable third spot on the Senate ticket. So it's all a little bit clumsy and ungainly, I think.
So what reach will the party receive after backing him? Is it a sign that it would like to have more growth and more reach around Australia?
I think One Nation is, it is a curious beast. It's a bit like the National Party. We say, every election we say the National Party will eventually die, but it always comes back to life. And we've said the same thing about One Nation and other minor parties as well. I mean, even the Australian Democrats are back. So these political parties have a very long life, especially given that Pauline Hanson is still active. When Pauline Hanson retires, it may be a very different measure. But we've seen the One Nation vote collapse in Queensland and in the Western Australian state elections. But, paradoxically, it actually grew in the most recent South Australian state election, where they scored about 4% of the vote. So it suggests that the party is far from dead. And my understanding, it has a fairly large branch structure and membership. So in terms of its influence and its vote, that probably hasn't increased, but it's also become a much more savvy party. You know, they are much cleverer, I think, today than they were 20 years ago at targeting voters in seats and contests that they can win. So there's no doubt that while One Nation is home is in Queensland, that doesn't mean it won't have an influence in other states. And, you know, as you can see on screen, Mark Latham, of course, was elected to the New South Wales upper house. So the preferences of One Nation, I think, will matter more than actually winning seats in other states. So, you know, just because it's a Queensland-based party doesn't mean its influence stops at the Tweed River.